Hey, we're in the Saise Valley. This is an area just outside of Mbala and kind of the far northeast of Zambia. We are out here looking for orchids. Right now we're in a bit of a dambo grassland. And the Saise Valley is actually kind of a well-known place for some of our terrestrial orchids here in Zambia. It was mentioned in Graham Williamson's late 70s book on the orchids of South Central Africa, a publication that's quite difficult to come by now. But we are here to see what we can find 40 some odd years later, and let's go have a look and see what beauties there are to discover. We were directed to this kind of short grass, dambo grassland, by friends who've been here before and done some scouting in these areas for orchids. These are fairly short wooded seepage areas that that do carry quite a few different species, but you have to walk around and have a look for them because they don't usually stand all that high. And case in point with this Brachycorythis tenuior, which might grow, up to 10 inches or about 25 centimeters tall, and producing these fantastic purple little flowers, but unless you are just about over top of it, you won't really see it. And we were lucky enough to come across some small population of albino plants with these gorgeous pure white flowers. I've come across pure white forms of a few Disa species, but it's not a very common thing, so it was lovely to see this. Then, in addition, Orthochilus nuttii, which is only known from this kind of northern eastern parts of Zambia and into southern Tanzania, was just fantastic to see with their kind of lovely buttery yellow flowers, and a small short display. Again, this you'd miss if you weren't right on top of it. The Platycoryne buchananiana, it's a very common one. I come across it across northern Zambia, and they form sometimes fairly large colonies, and that was a lovely one to see as well, although very common, as I say. And then the same with this Habenaria retinervis, which again is quite a common plant. It's also a woodland plant. It grows all the way down into southern parts of Zambia, including around Lusaka here. But it was always nice to kind of see these things up in flower there as well. Then finally we had Habenaria goetzeana. This is a fairly short species. Loves short kind of wet dambo grasslands like this, and these flowers were just about finishing, so it was lovely to see that. But the dambo itself was just kind of a pure joy to walk through, very easy to move through, very sparse kind of inflorescences of some of these taller grasses, and then interspersed with more of the forb material, this Pachycarpus bisacculatus. Again, this is a fairly common one and does grow around Lusaka, but it is always just a joy to come across these in flower because they have such intricate flowers in the same way that orchids do as well. The Heteromorpha involucrata in the Apocynaceae family or the carrot family was a nice one. Fairly decent sized plants. The leaves actually are somewhat as interesting as the flowers on these, but again was full of insects and bees when we were there, when it was in flower, which was nice. And then this Lindsea rosenii, or what used to be Vernonia rosenii, with its corn blue, like striking blue flowers. This was an amazing one, and this bee was obviously really enjoying that flower as well. When we wrapped up from that seepage dambo, we then headed down towards the Saise River, as along it there's kind of large stretches of riverside dambo. Now this is a proper dambo, with the majority of the water seeping in from the surrounding upper boundaries of the woodland down into the river. A floodplain grassland would be where the river bank breaks its boundaries, flooding the surrounding grasslands with river water, and those tend to be much more poor habitats in terms of biodiversity. You don't see much more than grasses and sedges in those. But in a proper riverside dambo, with the seepage coming in from the side, it provides so much more nutrients to then increase the biodiversity of the area. Okay, so we've now left that previous site that we were in and are in a very wet dambo. It is difficult to walk through. My feet are wet from getting water into my boots, and we're just kind of making our way through, seeing what there is here. But this is a huge contrast to the last open kind of more seepage dambo that we were in a little earlier this morning. So let's continue to have a look and see what we find here. Riverside dambos are not always the easiest to walk through, and here we had areas where you had at least 30 centimeters, sometimes more, of water that you were trudging through, and not knowing exactly what the bottom was going to be like. But we were coming across some interesting things like this Blue Nile water lily, which are always lovely to see, but usually unable to get to. We also had Eulophia angolensis growing in these inundated parts of the dambo. These have fantastic tall spikes of yellow and maroon flowers, sometimes pure yellow actually as well, and are always kind of a joy to see, but are difficult to get to unless you've got the proper footwear, because they can grow in quite deep water sometimes as well. Then Habenaria weberiana, which is not as colorful as the Eulophia, but quite a nice little find there as well, but also growing in quite a bit of water, and not always easy to get to, and just shaking around in the wind like this, like little insects on a stick, which is always quite interesting. Then this member of the mallow family, which I always have a hard time pronouncing, something buchananaria. I'm just going to leave it at that, because the first part is a little bit difficult for me. But this was all over the dambos there as well. And then slightly more colorful and standoutish was the Morea bella, which is always lovely to see, and in stark contrast to the Morea brevifolia, which we saw at Capeticia. These ones have much larger flowers and are brilliant yellow with that. The dambo that we were in and the Saise River kind of backs up into Mount Sunzu. It's one of the taller peaks in Zambia, and it is itself also quite botanically interesting. It's definitely someplace I need to get to in future, but it gives a nice view over the whole landscape here with the upper ranges of the dambo, where things like this Desotis simonis-jamesii was growing. These are fairly large flowered plants, single flowers per stalk, and just stunningly colored. Most of the Desotis are this kind of purplish pink color, but this one was just lovely in the size of the flowers. The Nydia chrysantha is a very common one. You find it in these dambo grasslands around Zambia, but always nice to see that bright shot of yellow. And then a nice touch to come across this Drosera madagascariensis in flower, which you don't usually see them being in flower, but the flowers are quite tiny, as are the plants themselves, so I guess that kind of matches. Then in the Cyperaceae family with this Rhynchospora candida, one of the more ornamental members of the family with these kind of nice bright white flower heads, which is lovely to see. And then again, the Chlorophyta colubrinum, a very common widespread chlorophytum species, happy flowering right on the edges of the grassland areas and so forth, together with the Haplocarpa scaposa, which again a very common constituent of some of these wetter areas of dambo grasslands. It's lovely to see. So it started to rain a bit, and I think we are now going to call it a day. We've been into the two dambos, we've kind of been into this a little bit of woodland here at the moment, but we're not finding too much. And with this kind of rain happening, it is now time, I think, to kind of pack it up. We got drenched already on this trip. I don't want to get drenched again. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this series of videos from the trip up to northeastern Zambia yet again. If you have, please subscribe, hit the like button, and we'll see you in the next videos. Cheers.